right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We are on chapter 2. As per usual, I'm going to be going through the PowerPoint slides, so you are free to again join me. If you don't want to watch the video, you can just click on through the slides while listening to my radio voice. Okay. So, you're going to notice the chapter 2 vocabulary words is immense compared to the the four that we had for chapter 1. That being the case, these are all very, very important. In fact, chapter 2 is probably hands down the most influential and I think necessary chapter all the chapters are obviously important. This one, for some reason, for me, really speaks volumes to ways in which we argue and why we argue and where it all comes from. And a lot of it are these key terms here. We have our assumptions and our values, morals and ethics, and so forth. So the list is very long. I'm going to go through it really quick in the sense of I'm going to tell you what we got, and then we can go through and actually define them as they are. Okay, we have assumptions, values, value assumptions, value conflicts, value prioritization, morals, ethics, religious values, prima facie values. Again, you're going to see some of these words are going to be on the quiz. Okay, ideal value, real value, the role exchange test, the universal consequences test, new cases test, higher principles test, rationalizations. There's a whole list of those, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Claim, reasons, warrants, and qualifiers. All right, so let us begin. Okay, so the first thing we need to ask is, what is an assumption? Okay, if you're like me, my father once told me, an assumption makes an ass out of you and me. Get it? You and me? Okay, all right. I like puns. I'm a punny person. Okay, so with an assumption, it's something that we believe to be true, and it is usually taken for granted rather than being questioned. So an assumption is something that we just go, oh, yeah, I know this. We take this belief this thing that we believe to be true, and we take it for granted, and we just don't question it. Okay, it can be reflected as part of a group, like the Boy Scouts. Okay, or individually. Okay. Value assumptions are assumptions about what we individually believe in value, what we individually believe in value. Okay. Reality assumptions, belief about the world. We do talk a bit more on chapter 3. And actually, chapter 3 is the other part to this that is really incredibly important. And why it is we argue the way we do, we have beliefs the way we do. So anyway, chapter 3 is another really good fun one. Okay, so I would like you to maybe take a minute and ask yourself, where do we get our assumptions? Like sorry, give me a second, my computer's being a weirdo. Where do we get assumptions? Where do these come from? Where do we think that we might go, I have an assumption about this person, place, or thing. Why is that? All right, so reality is they come from parents, they come from siblings, they come from teachers, they come from the classroom, and they come from school. They also come from the television, TV shows, movies, and absolutely, truthfully, the internet. Okay, and we also get it from friends. So our assumptions come from these things that are kind of interwoven in our life, the things that we are surrounded with. Again, family, friends, siblings, again, schools for sure, TV, movies, and definitely the internet. God save us from the internet. It's a blessing, and it is also a huge curse. So, I don't know. That's just how it is. So, one kind of assumption that we make is about values. Okay, and values are beliefs, ideas, or principles that are considered worthy and are held to a high regard. Okay, so beliefs are ideas and principles that are considered worthy and that we hold to a very high regard. And where did we get these values? Okay, so assumptions, remember, they came from parents, siblings, teachers, classrooms, schools, TVs, internet, and friends. But the values include that same list, but we also have church and books. Okay, so church has a huge influence on our values. Our assumptions come from the other side. with the parents and the teachers and the internet and whatever. But now we have church and books are what also influence our values, or where our values come from. Okay. So real quick little thing is, think about a fictional character whom you admire. And why do you admire this fictional character? And I really like doing it in class because I really get some very interesting characters that you're like, oh, I never would have thought about that. Like, why that character? I have a handful. Of course, you don't know this yet, but Seinfeld, Friends, and SpongeBob and Golden Girls I reference all the time. If you haven't seen it, then this is way over your head. But Rose from Golden Girls, I just absolutely find that I admire her for her sweetness, her honesty, her loyalty. Yes, she's naive, but she's also just like the purest. She's just the sweetest. The fictional character, obviously. Another one is actually Tina from Bob's Burgers. It's the same thing. She's true to who she is, and she tries to be as honest as she can. Even when she tries to lie, she can't. I don't know. I just find those really good characters to admire. So maybe sit and think about this, because we will be doing an assignment on television, a TV series where we will apply this information. So I don't know. You can take a minute and think about it. Okay. All right. I am going to move on to the next. So look at page 39, and I want you to consider 5 values that really speak to you. And in a sense, like, all of these kind of like appeal to us, but if you had to pick 5, which would they be? And for me, it was a little bit harder because we're thinking values in regards to what, right? People, boyfriends, husbands, friends, sisters, cousins, I don't know. How are we applying these values? And for me, it would be like an application for all people, for all humanity, at least in America, maybe, I don't know. Compassion obviously is one of them. Safety is one of them. Honesty is my top value. That would be my biggest value. If I were to say, of all the values and everything, if you could only pick one, it would actually be honesty. And then we have justice and education. Education, big surprise over here, right? Those were kind of my top 5. There's a few that are like, oh, maybe patience might be one. They're kind of in between. But kind of sit and think, what would be your 5 top values? And really think, why? Why would that be? Why do I choose honesty as that top value? Because I value that. I value the truth. I value, even if it hurts, what's the thing we need to know? Okay, so I would write them down. Just maybe kind of hold on to them for the future. Just consider that, because your values might change. And I'm sure last year, last semester, maybe even, who knows, last week, maybe these values might have been a little bit different, I don't know if, maybe some people are like, freedom is the value, right? Freedom of what? Freedom of, because with freedoms, you do have to give up freedoms. That's a different conversation, but kind of consider that. To have certain freedoms, you have to give up certain freedoms. I don't know what that means to you, but little something there. Anyway, okay, so now we're going to talk about value assumption, okay? So a value assumption is beliefs about what is good and important, and it forms the basis of our opinions on issues, okay? So remember what value and assumption is. An assumption is something that we assume to be true and we kind of take it for granted, and a value is something that we know to be the thing that we value. So a belief about what is good, okay, it's our assumption on a value. And it's important on the basis of our opinions of that issue. So why are they important to us? This is what we end up arguing about, right? So we have things we value and assumptions on, why we value these things. And this is why we end up with a bunch of arguments. So, we talked about the butterfly lady. I think it's butterfly. I can't remember her name. Anyway, the lady who's climbing up the tree and she's trying to save the tree. And then they have the old growth loggers are like, we're going to cut down the tree. And for those of us who are, environmentalists, like, save the tree. And the guys are like, yeah, but it's our business. We do have to, take down this old growth, right? So we need to understand, what values are represented on each side of that spectrum, not just business, but maybe there's more to it, maybe there is an environmental aspect to that old logging versus not cutting it down because it's sacred and it's nature. right? So there's an argument on every side. And the question is, should we respect each other's values? Should she be respecting the fact that, these old growth loggers have to do their job and there's more to it? And should the loggers respect her for wanting to preserve a beautiful old tree? And should we seek to understand each other's values? And I'm going to say the answer is yes. Okay. Yes to either of those. And it's really hard, especially when your values and these assumptions on these values are so strong. And remember, we talked about that emotional aspect to, these arguments and how we believe and feel about a thing. Should we seek to understand each other's values? We have to. At this point, I'm going to say yes, and we need to. And that goes for, me and anybody. And this is the hardest part, because there's some people whose values are completely different than ours. There's someone who values, surprisingly, dishonesty for this reason and how they think that's the thing that they need. And for me, I value honesty. So I'm like, I can't have a really hard time seeing someone else's view. But that's when we have to really start to understand. And, when we talk about arguments and reasonings and the conclusions behind why we make these decisions, can you prove to me why you felt your dishonest way was worth it to me to understand why you would have done what you did? Okay, so I don't know. That's just like a value that keeps sticking out to me. So kind of winging it on that one. So we'll see where that leads us in this discussion. Okay, so. Now, a value conflict. Now, here's an issue, because sometimes our value conflicts, these are disagreements about the priority of different values and how they affect our decision making. Okay, so we might value one thing over the other, but they're both still values. How do we hold on to those? And like an example would be, so my mom, my stepmom, mom, whatever, she's in a huge value conflict because she values family and she values her religion, and they are like right there. That's like, how do you pick between the two for her? And she recently found out that my cousin, her niece, is gay. She's getting engaged. She just posted some beautiful photos online, and she's just so stinking happy. It's really sweet. It's really beautiful. And my mom's like, oh, I really want to be happy for her, but my religion says I can't. Right? So now she's in this thing. She's like, I want to be happy, but I don't know how to be, because I'm told I'm not supposed to be, and I don't know where I stand here, because they're literally like this, right? And for her, this is her biggest value conflict. And the hard part about this is deciding which value do you value more. Do you value, the love that you have for your family and their happiness and well-being? They're not doing anything of harm in a sense. Maybe to some people religiously, they might believe it is harmful, but to my mother, there's nothing that this person is actually physically doing to her to actually harm her. And so she wants to see her niece happy. She wants to see her live a beautiful, happy life. But then her religion is saying that she's not supposed to be happy for her. So she's really in conflict. So for her, she has to make this decision, where do I stand, and how do I make this decision? And so, for her, I'm like, yeah, just pray about it, right? Like, I don't know how to tell you. This is an individual decision that you need to make. And then maybe for her values might change. Maybe she might see, and we actually talked about this, and she started to see, for herself, she's like, I love seeing her happy, and I have to question maybe, some of these values I'm holding on to, because it's starting to affect the way I love people. And for her, love was above all, above all those values. And she had to go, I think love has to win on this. So I believe that, I think she said something on the lines of, we are all God's children. And so she was to say, if God can love her, so can I. So then love wins. That will be my my value. So she ended up having to change the way in which she, viewed this. So anyway, this is a value conflict, and some might agree and disagree. What's really cool is it's not you who has to decide for her. She gets to decide for herself. And that's why this is, a conflict, right? Deciding what is right for you as an individual in your values and assumptions. So Okay, so unresolved arguments, right, are often due to contested values, especially cherished ones. I can't tell you how often me and family members or my mom and family have had these very contentious just arguments over certain things because of the values that each of them hold so to their heart, like truthfully. I mean, I could give you a whole list of different ones just in my family members alone. Again, I can't be on social media with them because we just have such different values. And while I'm definitely open to seeing their opinion and where they're coming from, and I usually don't say anything, sometimes I just have to go. I can't with y'all. I can't. So I would like you to kind of take a minute. You can pause me after I ask this question and ask yourself, what are some examples of unresolved arguments in our culture? All right, what are some arguments that we still argue, that we will always argue because this is, human nature, and these are things that people have value of, they hold value to, right? What are some unresolved arguments in our culture? I wish we were in class. You can actually, if you want, you can email me if you want. You don't have to, but if you're like curious to know some topics. But right, we think about abortion or freedom of speech and all kinds of stuff. I'm sure there's a whole list. I'm kind of blanking right now. I'm on another topic in my brain, but there's so many. There's so many different topics that are unresolved because of the values that we hold and how some are just so different than others. And again, think of those 5 that you hold so true to your heart. They mean something to you to the point where, there's a reason why, people fight to the death over this stuff, I guess, right? So, who do you have, value conflict with? And I know who I do. Again, it came me on social media because of it, right? So who do you have value conflict and why? And you really have to think, like, what is really the issue? And I have had to sit, like, and contemplate, what are the reasons why I have a conflict with, either these family members or people or whatever. And a lot of it is because their arguments are not valid. They don't have they don't follow an argument where we have our reasonings to develop our conclusion, right? Like, you have a claim, you got your reasons, and that gives you that conclusion. I don't get that. And I think that's where I get my frustration. I'm like, I don't mind having an argument, but you got to have your reasonings behind it with evidence, right? That makes that statement. You can't just say murder is murder, because that's not a statement or that's not an argument. That's just a statement, okay? And the question is, can you have value conflict with yourself? Can absolutely. Like, just like my mom, her conflict within herself was like, man, this is what I value, but I also value this. Which one's more important? And then she found the value that was even above that. She's like, oh, I guess that's my other value. So it's just kind of it's sometimes these in some people's minds become a moral dilemma. At what point do I have to give up this value for whatever reason? Okay. So that brings us to value prioritization, all right? It's the process of choosing which value is most important in an issue. What is the most important value? You might be thinking it's these 2, and then there's something else that's really involved in it. Again, like my mom. Is it religion? Is it family? Love. Okay, that's where she came up with. So say climate change is the issue at hand, okay? So the value here, for me, the value is I believe in climate change. I think it's something we need to address, but I also want to drive a nice car. At least a car that's going to get me to work and not break down. Okay, I don't know. That's, for me, I say drive a nice car. There are electric cars that absolutely are incredibly nice. They are changing things from when I was buying cars in the first place, right? So, say another one is, you need to get a new phone, laptop, or the video games, right? My husband plays video games all the time. Anyway, so you need a new phone because your old one's dying, right? We're contributing to e-trash. The laptop, the video games, it's the same thing. Trying to keep up with the next thing because that's what society kind of pushes. Do you value which being part of society or a climate change? I don't know now. I'm confused. All right, so prioritizing maybe government funds on a state or national budget that would help us. You know, where does this money go? President Biden's working on that right now. Some people are arguing it, and we're trying to figure out what's the best thing for us. In the end, I'll be honest with you, I'm pretty sure the planet's kind of, important. But that's me. Some people go, oh, well, I won't be alive by that time. I want to live a good life. But for the rest of us, it's like, well, I also want to live a good life too, where I can breathe and have a healthy life. So with this, just what are your values, okay? And then that final statement would be like, meh, it's too late. It's too late. Doesn't matter. I'm just going to live my best life and screw the earth. Don't care. Oh, also, it's fake news. And by the way, I hate that I even have to put that on there. I hate that statement. Fake news drives me nuts. It's hypocrisy. It's just, I got articles for you about news, and all of it, in a sense, really quick tangent here, is all news is manipulative because the whole point of it is making money. All right, so unless you find something that's incredibly unbiased, which would be awesome, something objectionable, tell me where. It's really hard to find it anywhere, though New York Times, I will say, does a really good job of that. So anyway, so on page 42, we're going to scroll on through to that. Normally we do this as a class exercise, and I kind of want you to be able to identify the values in a conflict. Okay, what are the values in it? And so the first one here we've got, should teenagers be required to obtain the approval of their parents before they receive birth control or other forms of contraception? Okay, so teenagers, this is before you turn 18. When you're 18, you don't have to get your parental, okay on that. So I'm going to give you the answer really quick. So the conflict in this issue is between the value of individual freedom, all right, and privacy on one side, and parental responsibility and guidance on the other. All right, so should birth parents be allowed to take their children back from adoptive parents after they've signed a paper relinquishing rights? So what's the value here? The value of the birth parents' rights, is that our value? Or the value of the law, which they have already signed away, their rights. They've, you know what I mean? So are you valuing what in this? And these are the conflicting issues. 3, should you give a substantial part of your paycheck to a charity that feeds famine-stricken families, or use it for some new jeans you need? So what's the value? The value being, it's my money, I can spend it as I want, and I'm going to get these jeans. Like, I'm sorry that you're famine-stricken. Like, not my problem. Or for you, are you like, actually, I could do without jeans. I don't need them. It's not really that important to me, but there are families who need to eat to survive. I think I'm going to give it to charity. So those are the two, different value conflicts. What is the thing that is the conflict here? So go ahead. There's up to 10. Kind of take a minute and really just, break it open and go, what are the two conflicts that we're looking at here? And do you agree? Do you disagree? I don't know. It's up to you. This is yours. So, okay. You can pause me and go do that, and I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. You probably didn't stop it because you just want to get through this. Okay, so some values concern right and wrong behaviors. Right and wrong. What does that sound like? That is a moral. Okay, so a moral is principles that distinguish right from wrong behavior. Here's the thing, though. What is right and what is wrong? Well, that's based on what you think morally is right or wrong, okay? So the idea here is people with integrity act according to their morals, right? So when someone is, acts with integrity,